Welcome to Module 9, where we'll explore income-producing properties with a focus on leases, rents, and the market for space. In this session, we'll delve into how cash flow, the structure of leases, and the overall market dynamics come together to influence real estate value. Understanding these factors is crucial for making informed decisions in real estate investment and management. Let's dive into how these elements interact and impact property valuation. Income-producing properties are real estate assets specifically held to generate ongoing cash flow through rental income, rather than being occupied by the owner. The key idea here is that their value is directly tied to the income they produce. Investors focus closely on factors like rents, operating expenses, vacancy rates, and the potential returns they can expect from these properties. Common examples include apartment buildings, office spaces, retail centers, warehouses, and mixed-use developments. The performance of these properties largely depends on the lease structures in place and the demand for space in the market. Ultimately, these income assets are valuable because they can consistently lease space and deliver future cash flow, making them attractive investment opportunities. When we talk about income-producing properties, the key advantage lies in the steady and predictable cash flows they generate. These properties transform rent into recurring income, giving investors a reliable revenue stream. This stability is crucial because it reduces the uncertainty typically associated with investments. Moreover, consistent cash flow not only supports day-to-day financial health, but also contributes significantly to long-term property value. Essentially, these types of properties offer a balance of income reliability and potential growth, making them a valuable component in any investment portfolio. On this slide, we're looking at how leases directly influence property value. The key connection here is rental income. A strong lease ensures steady, reliable rental income, which is crucial for investors because it drives their returns. When leases generate consistent cash flow, it boosts the overall value of the property. Simply put, the better the lease terms and cash flow, the higher the property's market value. This relationship is fundamental for understanding real estate investment and asset pricing. Let's take a closer look at the key components of a lease agreement. First, rental terms are crucial because they define the rent amount, how often payments are due, any required deposits, and escalation clauses that can increase rent over time. These elements are what give you predictability in your income stream. Next, maintenance responsibilities are clearly laid out in the lease. This section determines who, between the landlord and the tenant, is responsible for repairs, operating costs, and the general upkeep of the property. Knowing this helps prevent disputes and ensures the property is well maintained. Finally, the duration of the lease sets the length of the lease term, renewal options, and termination rights. These factors directly impact your stability as a landlord and your risk exposure. A longer lease might offer more stability, while flexibility in termination can help manage risk. Overall, a lease is not just a tool for generating income, but also a legal framework that protects both parties. Understanding these key components will help you manage your properties more effectively. Let's talk about the key responsibilities of landlords when it comes to managing income-producing properties. First and foremost, landlords must maintain habitable conditions in their properties. This means ensuring that the living space is safe, clean, and suitable for tenants to live in without health risks. Next, it's crucial to ensure safety compliance by adhering to all local building codes and safety regulations to protect tenants from hazards. Providing promised services is another important responsibility. Landlords need to deliver any amenities or services agreed upon in the lease. Lastly, landlords must protect tenants' right to quiet enjoyment, ensuring that tenants can live peacefully without undue disturbances. These responsibilities are fundamental to managing rental properties effectively and maintaining good landlord-tenant relationships. When we look at tenant responsibilities in a lease, there are several key duties that help protect both the income for the landlord and the condition of the property. First and foremost, tenants need to pay rent on time. This is crucial because it supports a stable cash flow, which keeps the financial side of leasing secure. Next, keeping the premises clean is important. This helps prevent avoidable wear and tear, preserving the property's value over time. Third, tenants must follow all lease terms. This includes how the property is used, occupancy limits, and any other rules set forth in the agreement. ensuring everyone's expectations are clear and met. Finally, it's essential to report any needed repairs promptly. Doing so limits further damage and helps reduce liability issues, maintaining a safe and well-functioning space. These responsibilities work together to create a smooth and mutually beneficial leasing experience. Here we focus on lease terms and their duration, which are crucial in balancing flexibility and income stability. Generally, longer lease terms provide more dependable cash flow and reduce the risk of turnover. Starting with short-term leases, these are typically month-to-month agreements. They offer the highest flexibility for both landlords and tenants and make it easy to adjust rent or occupancy as needed. However, this flexibility comes with higher turnover and vacancy risk, which is why short-term leases are common in residential markets. Moving to medium-term leases, usually lasting between 1 to 3 years. These strike a balance between commitment and flexibility. They provide more predictable income for landlords while still allowing periodic opportunities to renegotiate terms. Medium-term leases are often favored for small business spaces, providing stability without locking both parties in for too long. Finally, long-term leases typically extend for 5 years or more. These offer the greatest income stability, making them common in commercial real estate. Long-term leases support financing and valuation processes and lower rollover risk for landlords. They usually come with detailed operating terms to clearly define responsibilities and expectations. So, the key takeaway is that as the lease duration increases, cash flow reliability improves, but flexibility decreases. Each lease type serves different needs depending on whether stability or adaptability is a priority. When it comes to maintenance obligations, understanding who is responsible for what is crucial. Typically, the landlord is in charge of structural repairs and building systems. This includes the roof, exterior, and common areas, as well as major capital items, unless the lease specifically shifts these responsibilities. On the other hand, tenants usually handle routine upkeep inside their lease space. They're also responsible for any damage caused by their use or negligence. In some leases, tenants might also cover utilities, janitorial services, or common area maintenance, often referred to as CM. Ultimately, the lease agreement is the key document that defines how these costs are shared, so it's important to review it carefully to know your obligations. Let's talk about the legal power of leases. A lease is more than just an agreement. It's a binding contract that clearly defines the rights, obligations, and financial terms for both landlords and tenants. This legal framework is crucial because enforceable lease terms help make future income much more predictable, which is essential for financial planning. Additionally, having clear remedies outlined in the lease reduces disputes related to rent, maintenance, and defaults, making the relationship between parties smoother. For investors, strong leases are key. They support property valuation, make financing easier to obtain, and help control overall risk in the investment. Understanding these points helps us see why leases are such powerful legal tools in real estate. Let's talk about how supply and demand affect rental rates in real estate. Rental rates tend to fluctuate when the amount of available space and the demand from tenants get out of balance. When demand is high but supply is limited, rents naturally push upward because more people are competing for fewer spaces. On the other hand, if there's too much supply and not enough demand, landlords might offer concessions or lower rents, and vacancy rates can rise. Over time, markets tend to move toward an equilibrium rent. This is a point where the amount of space offered matches the amount of space tenants are looking for. At equilibrium, rent levels and occupancy stabilize. However, if either the demand or supply curve shifts, like if more properties come onto market or if tenant interest increases, then rents and occupancy levels adjust accordingly. Understanding this balance is key to predicting rental trends and making smart real estate decisions. Here, we're looking at how limited supply combined with high demand impacts rental rates. When supply is tight but demand stays strong, you often see premium rental rates, sometimes increasing by more than 12%. In these constrained submarkets, average asking rents can jump significantly, often by less than 4%, but still enough to signal strong pricing power for landlords. Vacancy rates tend to be low in these areas, which means landlords have the leverage to maintain higher rents. It's not unusual to see rent growth that's 2 to 3 times faster than in more balanced markets. Overall, this dynamic creates a favorable environment for property owners looking to maximize their returns. When we talk about location, it's important to differentiate between prime and secondary markets. Prime markets typically command higher rents because of their desirable locations and stronger economic drivers. They also tend to have lower vacancy rates, which means tenants are in high demand and space is quickly leased. On the other hand, secondary markets usually have lower entry prices, making them more accessible for investment. However, these markets exhibit more rent sensitivity, meaning rent levels can fluctuate more based on economic conditions. The real opportunity in secondary markets often lies in value add upside, where improvements or repositioning can significantly increase property value. Ultimately, choosing between prime and secondary markets depends on your investment goals and risk tolerance, but always remember that location is a critical factor influencing returns. Here, we see how economic trends directly influence rental demand. When the economy grows, business activity expands, which causes increased incomes, investments, and the need for more space. This growth leads to job creation, and with more workers, there are naturally more households and firms looking for places to live, work, and grow their operations. As a result, we observe increased rental demand. Higher occupancy rates tend to support stronger rents and boost property values. Essentially, more tenants mean more households and businesses entering the rental market, while less vacancy creates tighter availability. This puts landlords in a stronger position to set higher prices. So, when the economy adds jobs, the demand for apartments, office spaces, retail locations, and industrial facilities typically rises alongside it. This relationship is fundamental to understanding how rental markets respond to wider economic conditions. Let's take a closer look at market cycles, focusing on how rental markets tend to move through distinct phases. These phases include expansion, peak, contraction, and trough. Essentially, rental markets don't stay static. They fluctuate over time in response to various factors. During the expansion phase, demand for rentals rises steadily, which usually drives rental rates higher as availability tightens. This phase continues until the market reaches its peak, the point where rental rates are at their highest and market activity is at its strongest. After the peak, we enter the contraction phase. This is when demand starts to soften, and rental rates may plateau or even decline. The contraction signals a slowdown in the market as supply begins to outpace demand. Eventually, the market hits the trough, which is its lowest point, with lower rental rates and reduced activity. Following the trough, the market begins to recover, demand starts to pick up again, and the cycle repeats. Understanding these phases is crucial for anticipating market trends and making informed decisions in the rental market. Here, we're breaking down some essential terms for analyzing rental property performance. First, gross rental income refers to the total rent collected before any expenses are deducted. This is the starting point of your property's revenue. Next, operating expenses include costs like taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs, and property management fees. These are necessary expenses to keep the property running smoothly. Once we subtract operating expenses from the gross rental income, we get the net operating income, or NOI. This figure represents the income left over after covering the property's basic costs. It's a key indicator of the property's profitability. Finally, the capitalization rate, or cap rate, is calculated by dividing the NOI by the property's value. The cap rate gives you a quick snapshot of the potential return on investment, as well as the associated risk level. Understanding these terms is crucial for making informed decisions about income-producing properties. The capitalization rate, or cap rate, is a critical benchmark for investors in real estate. Simply put, the cap rate is calculated by dividing the net operating income of a property by its current market value. This ratio helps investors quickly compare the potential returns across different properties, making it easier to identify which investments might be more profitable. Additionally, the cap rate signals how a property is priced relative to its income-generating potential. Lower cap rates generally indicate higher prices for expected income, while higher cap rates suggest lower prices, often reflecting greater perceived risk. It's important to remember that properties with higher cap rates typically come with higher risk, So investors need to balance their return expectations with the level of risk they're willing to take on. Here, we're focusing on the relationship between vacancy rates and investment risk. When vacancy rates are high, it means fewer units are rented out, which directly reduces the amount of rent collected. This weaker cash flow creates greater uncertainty for investors because their expected income isn't as reliable. Despite these vacancies, fixed costs like maintenance and property taxes still need to be paid, which further strains the property's finances. Over time, if vacancy persists, it not only increases the risk for investors, but also lowers the overall value of the property. Understanding this connection is crucial for making informed investment decisions. Let's take a closer look at the arguments for rent control first. One of the main benefits is that it stabilizes housing costs for current tenants, which can be really important in cities where rents are rising quickly. This stability helps reduce displacement, meaning fewer people are forced to move out of their homes due to skyrocketing prices. Another key point is that rent control improves predictability for household budgeting, making it easier for families to plan their finances without worrying about sudden rent hikes. Additionally, rent control helps preserve community continuity by keeping long-term residents in neighborhoods as they change, which can contribute to a stronger sense of belonging and neighborhood identity. On the other hand, there are some potential downsides and market impacts to consider. Rent control can discourage new housing supply because if landlords feel their returns are capped, they might be less motivated to build or invest in new rental properties. It may also lead to reduced maintenance, since property owners facing tighter profit margins might cut back on repairs and upkeep. Another issue is that rent control creates pricing distortions, causing a gap between controlled units and those in the open market, which can complicate the housing ecosystem. Finally, rent control can limit mobility, as tenants might choose to stay in below-market units longer than they otherwise would, which could reduce overall housing availability. Understanding both sides of this issue is crucial as we think about effective housing policies. Technology has significantly transformed the leasing process in several key ways. First, digital platforms have streamlined how we handle listings, applications, and even e-signatures, making the entire leasing process much faster and more efficient. Virtual tours have also become a game changer, allowing prospects to explore and compare spaces from a distance before deciding to visit in person. This changes the way people evaluate properties and saves everyone time. Additionally, data analytics provide owners with valuable insights, enabling them to monitor demand, set pricing strategically, and understand tenant behavior more accurately. Altogether, these technological advancements are reshaping the leasing landscape for the better. When we talk about market segmentation, it's important to distinguish between residential and commercial properties because they operate quite differently. Residential spaces usually have shorter leases, often around 6 to 12 months, and the tenants are individuals or families. This leads to steadier demand overall, but also higher turnover and more intensive property management. On the other hand, commercial leases tend to be longer term, often spanning multiple years with negotiated terms tailored to businesses, retailers, or office users. The rental income from commercial properties can be much larger, but there's also more risk involved, especially due to vacancies and sensitivity to economic cycles. Investors view these income streams differently because the tenant profiles, lease structures, and risk factors vary significantly between residential and commercial markets. Understanding these differences is crucial for making informed investment decisions and accurately pricing the income potential from each segment. When evaluating investment opportunities, it's crucial to assess each deal through 6 key filters to ensure sound decision-making. First, consider the location quality. This is fundamental because a prime location often determines a property's long-term value and appeal. Second, look at the tenant profile, which means understanding who is renting the space and their stability, as reliable tenants contribute to consistent income. Third, analyze the lease terms to gauge the security and duration of rental income, along with any clauses that might affect flexibility or risk. Fourth, evaluate market demand to see if there's strong interest in the property type or area, which can influence occupancy and pricing. Fifth, scrutinize operating expenses to understand the costs involved and how they impact overall profitability. Finally, assess the growth potential, looking at factors like property appreciation and opportunities for value-add improvements. These 6 filters together provide a comprehensive framework for making informed investment choices. When investing in income-producing properties, it's crucial to understand the different types of risk factors that can impact returns. First, we have market risk. This happens when there's an oversupply of properties, weak demand, or falling rents, all of which can squeeze both the income generated and the overall property value. Next is tenant risk, which involves issues like vacancies, late rent payments, or tenant defaults. These problems disrupt cash flow and can lead to higher leasing costs. Then, there's property risk, which comes from physical deterioration, deferred maintenance, or functional obsolescence. If a property starts to decline without proper upkeep or becomes outdated, it can significantly reduce your returns. Lastly, regulatory risk includes things like zoning changes, new rent control rules, taxes, or compliance costs, all of which can cut into profitability. Recognizing and managing these risks is key to making smart real estate investments. Here we have 3 main approaches to pricing income-producing properties. First is the income approach. This method values a property based on the income it can generate, typically looking at the net operating income and applying a capitalization rate. This approach is especially useful for investor-focused assets because it directly reflects the property's potential to produce cash flow. The key advantage here is that it ties the valuation to the actual income streams, making it very relevant for investors. Next is the market approach, which estimates a property's value by comparing it to recent sales of similar properties in the same area. This approach is grounded in current buyer behavior, making it very market-driven. Its key advantage is that it reflects what buyers are currently willing to pay, providing a timely and market-relevant valuation. Lastly, there's the cost approach. This starts by valuing the land, then adds the cost to replace the property, subtracting any depreciation. The key advantage of this approach is its usefulness when comparable sales are limited or hard to find. It provides a way to value a property based on the cost to recreate it, which can be important in certain situations. Each method has its strengths, and the choice depends on the specific property type and the available market data. When we talk about the lease as a risk mitigation tool, it's important to recognize how a well-drafted lease can significantly reduce uncertainty. By clearly defining the obligations of both the landlord and the tenant, it protects the landlord's income and ensures both parties comply with legal requirements. One key way it reduces disputes is through clear clauses covering rent, repairs, and the permitted use of the property. When these terms are explicitly stated, there's less room for disagreement or misunderstanding. Protecting cash flows is another critical function. By setting defined payment terms, outlining what happens if there's a default, and specifying renewal rights, the lease helps maintain more stable and predictable income from the property. Finally, having these provisions in writing ensures compliance with legal duties and strengthens the enforceability of the lease in real estate transactions. This makes the lease a vital tool not only for managing risk, but also for supporting the overall stability and success of property management. Let's break down the key factors that influence property value. It all starts with dependable net cash flow, which is primarily shaped by the lease income generated. The terms of the lease are crucial because they define how risks, responsibilities, and timing are divided between the landlord and tenant, and investors need to understand and price these factors carefully. The obligations of the landlord, tenant, and maintenance duties play a significant role as well, as they directly impact the operating costs and ultimately the returns on investment. Rental rates are not static either. They fluctuate based on the quality of the location, the local supply of properties, and the demand from tenants. Strong investment decisions come from a clear connection between market conditions, the specifics of the lease structure, and the property's long-term performance. Keeping all these elements in mind will help make smarter, more strategic property investments. To wrap up, the value of income-producing properties really depends on disciplined management. This means every aspect, from executing strategic leases to conducting thorough market analysis and managing risks effectively, plays a crucial role in success. Leases are essential because they generate consistent cash flow, giving the investment its financial foundation. Meanwhile, understanding the market helps set the right pricing, ensuring competitiveness and profitability. Lastly, strong operations are key to protecting those returns and maintaining the property's value over time. Keeping these elements in balance is what drives long term success in this field.